তোমারও যে শুধু ভক্ত, তোমাতে সে অনুরক্ত, তোমারও যে শুধু ভক্ত, ভক্তি মুক্তি তুচ্ছ করি জানে, ভক্তি মুক্তি তুচ্ছ করি জানে, বারে কো দেখিতে তব শিলাকার শ্রী বৈভব, বারে দেখিতে তব শিলাকার শ্রী বৈভব, তৃণ বলি অন্য সুখ মানে, তৃণ বলি অন্য সুখ মানে, সেসব ভক্তের সঙ্গে লীলা করো নানা রঙ্গে, সেসব ভক্তের সঙ্গে লীলা করো নানা রঙ্গে, বিরহ সহিতে না পারো, বিরহ সহিতে না পারো, কৃপা করিও কিঞ্চনে দেখাও মহাত্মা গণে, কৃপা করিও কিঞ্চনে দেখাও সাধু বিনা গতি নাহি আরো, সাধু বিনা গতি নাহি আরো, সে ভক্ত চরণ ধন কবি পাব দর্শন, সে ভক্ত চরণ ধন কবি পাব দর্শন, শোভিব আমার দুষ্ট মন, শোভিব আমার দুষ্ট মন, এ ভক্তি বিনোদ ভণি কৃপা হবে যত ক্ষণে, ভক্তি বিনোদ ভণি কৃপা হবে যত ক্ষণে, মহাত্মারও হবে দর্শন, মহাত্মারও হবে দর্শন, তবে মুই বৈষ্ণব নিব হরি হরি, বৈষ্ণব চরণ কল্যাণে রখনি, মাথিব হৃদয়ে ধরি, বৈষ্ণব চরণ কল্যাণে রখনি, মাথিব হৃদয়ে ধরি, কবি মুই বৈষ্ণব নিব হরি হরি, কবে মুই বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর অপ্রাকৃত সদা নির্দোষ আনন্দময়, বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর অপ্রাকৃত সদা কৃষ্ণ নামে প্রীত জড়ে উদাসীন জীবেতে দয়াদ্র হয়, কৃষ্ণ নামে প্রীত জড়ে উদাসীন জীবেতে দয়াদ্র হয়, অভিমানহীন ভজনে প্রবীণ বিষয়তে অনাসক্ত, অভিমানহীন ভজনী প্রবীণ বিষয়তে অনাসক্ত অন্তরে বাহিরে নিষ্কপট সদা নিত্য লীলা অনুরক্ত অন্তরে বাহিরে নিষ্কপট সদা নিত্য লীলা অনুরক্ত কনিষ্ঠ মধ্যম উত্তম প্রভেদে বৈষ্ণব ত্রিবিধ গণী কনিষ্ঠ মধ্যম উত্তম প্রভেদে কনিষ্ঠে আদর মধ্যমে প্রণতি উত্তমে শুশ্রূষা শুনি কনিষ্ঠে আদর মধ্যমে প্রণতি উত্তমে শুশ্রূষা শুনি.
And Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj's classes used to be like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, going from 8 o'clock in the morning up to noon. And it was fascinating for me to see this culture of having bhajans for like 30 minutes and glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam for like 45 minutes, and then coming to the verse and then opening up the purport line by line for like 2 hours. And then after that, the royal staircase conversations down the steps. So it was fascinating that someone had so much to speak about Krishna. Asaktistat gunakhyane pritistat vasati sthale, as one of the symptoms of Bhava Bhakti. So conceptions about Nityananda Prabhu as a volcano of love. Conceptions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being Bhakta Avatar. Coming to taste so many beautiful things, like the whole concept of the green mango and the yellow mango. I had never heard of these things. How Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the most juicy, most nectarian fruit of Godhead. Netrotsav, another beautiful concept that I heard only from Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj. That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming in front of Jagannath and the eyes meeting, eye-to-eye union. This was something that I had never thought of, never heard of. And another thing about Leela Purushottama, Maryada Purushottama, and Prema Purushottama. These terms, again, I heard from Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj in his tapes. And how wonderfully he would navigate from one chapter of one canto to another chapter of another canto with references, pulling off out of nowhere. And then singing Vaishnav bhajans and then quoting them and also ripping off the disciples in the front row. Out of so much affection. I always saw affection of Guru Tattva coming. In fact, one last story before I wrap up. In Atlanta, one senior devotee was once mentioning that he was part of the Mayapur Gurukul, and Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj was his teacher. And he somehow, as a child, had this nature of being little frivolous. So he would make fun of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj. He would make fun of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj's accent and his way of talking and singing and walking and expressions and gestures. And Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj would tolerate because he was a kid. But then he mentioned to me something very sweet. He said, one day as I was walking and playing around, Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj called me and said, Baba, come here. So then he said, offer obeisances to me and touch my feet. So he was standing with folded palms, and Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj said, you make fun of Vaishnav, you will get Vaishnav aparadh. Maya will hold you by the throat and push you into another mother's womb. I can forgive you, Baba. You offer obeisances, I will forgive you. And then Maya will not touch you. So, and then he offered obeisances, and Gour Govinda Maharaj blessed him. So, and laughed and blessed him. So what I see there is so much affection. It's like a father teaching the child to offer obeisances to the mother, and the mother teaching the child to offer obeisances to the father. So it was Gour Govinda Maharaj's sweet mood. So in this way, so many beautiful things that I personally want to offer as flowers of gratitude, stringing them to a garland at the lotus feet of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj. So to His Divine Grace, Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj, I sell myself as a slave, lifetime after lifetime, for how much His Vani has given me. I have never been able to see His form through my eyes or be the recipient of His glance, but I think His classes, His Nityananda Kirtans, 3-hour Kirtans, Daya Karo More Nitai, Daya Karo More, Agatira Gati Nitai, Sadhu Loka Bole. All of these things like move in my consciousness when I think of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj, like rocking and rolling on that Vyasasan, roaring like a lion. So
Govinda Maharaj, for me, reminded me of Prabhupada a lot. And that was something that I appreciated, that Krishna had sent us another, what we say, Prabhupada in one sense. Someone who knew the philosophy, who lived it each moment, who grew up in it, who preached it. It was I think for the society, it was a great opportunity to really grow in our Krishna consciousness by his association. And I'm sure somebody will speak about his disappearance, which really is indicative of his spiritual, power, his spiritual elevation. That was really how he disappeared. I can't really speak about it. I'm not qualified to, but I think that is really indicative of his spiritual stature.
started speaking about the Bhuvaneshwar temple. He started speaking about many of the obstacles he confronted in establishing the Bhuvaneshwar temple. He spoke about certain personalities that somehow didn't fully seem to accept that Prabhupada's words and his desire for the Bhuvaneshwar temple were sufficient in of themselves to see that it would manifest. And he started speaking about his own firm conviction about the instructions that Srila Prabhupada had given to him. And he spoke a lot about this project and then how it all manifested because of Srila Prabhupada's desire, taking very humble back seat in this description with me by trying to prove to me that everything there is in Srila Prabhupada's words, and the disciples should simply have deep faith in those words. And if the desire of spiritual master is for it to manifest, then it will manifest. And we have to have that faith. And that was his theme in relationship to the Bhuvaneshwar project. And then he also began speaking to me at one point about Srila Prabhupada's books, his teachings, his instructions. And he spoke to me in a way saying that he was oftentimes subjected to hearing words spoken about Srila Prabhupada that were very painful for him. Especially, he was saying how there sometimes people would say that Srila Prabhupada didn't give us everything. And therefore, it was very necessary to understand that because Srila Prabhupada hadn't given us everything, that we were somehow deficient. And Gour Govinda Maharaj, while he was explaining this to me, he choked and he couldn't speak. And he actually folded his palms with tears, and his eyes were so moist. And he just said in a shaking voice, he said, "Forgive me, Maharaj, I cannot speak." And he stopped and just sat there, tears coming from his eyes, because I could see how pained he was at the thought that anyone would think that way. And at some point, I don't know how long it went, after he begged forgiveness to me for not being able to speak, but he started speaking again. And he came back like a lion and tried to emphasize the point that Srila Prabhupada gave us everything. He picked up Chaitanya Charitamrita, he held the book facing me, opened it up. He was pointing to the verse in the book. And then he said, "Maharaj, everything is there, everything." And he was speaking so strongly. And he said, we have to become, as he oftentimes said, we have to become very expert in mining, to seeing how Srila Prabhupada had given us everything in his books and his instructions. And then he began speaking about how the spiritual master continues to instruct the disciple even after he departs. And he spoke, as you mentioned, Giriraj Maharaj mentioned, he spoke about how the spiritual master continues to instruct and care for his disciple through Shastras, as he was speaking about the books. And also, he said, through the mouths of sadhus and Vaishnavas. And in this way, he personally takes care of their spiritual life of anyone who's very eager to receive those instructions from their guru. And as he was speaking, I've reflected on this before, Gour Govinda Maharaj, I didn't take it that he was speaking to me by telling me, "Don't you know, Niranjana Swami Prabhupada is speaking to you now?" I didn't take it that that was his mood at all. I took it that he was speaking from very deep realization. And as I was sitting there, obviously what entered my heart was Prabhupada speaking to me. And for me, that in itself was very much a catalyst. And it was very transformational as to the potency of Guru and his relationship with his disciple. Because I was able to get a glimpse, just a glimpse, of the potency of the spiritual master in his relationship with his disciple, and the transparency of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj in that eternal message, which he was holding very fast to in his communication to me. It is an eternal spiritual principle, and no doubt exists in my mind whatsoever that eternal spiritual principle is possible for those who have faith like he had in the words of his spiritual master, my spiritual master, and for those who gave, and one thing that actually became apparent to me after that meeting with him, gave every fiber of his existence in service to his spiritual master. So much to the point that after that meeting with him, that if anybody would even suggest anything of any sort, that Gour Govinda Maharaj was not Srila Prabhupada's man, I became like the ferocious lion to demonstrate how there was no doubt in my mind of how every fiber of his existence was in full dedication to service to our Guru Maharaj.
I'm a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and the godbrother of Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj. Very gratefully so, to be considered in the same company, in the same spiritual family as an advanced devotee, an actually advanced devotee, who is like, in my mind, the flower in the forest that scents the whole forest. One pure Vaishnav who is steeped in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, remembering them, explaining them, and enacting them, changes the whole world. And when Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj humbly came into the assembly of ISKCON devotees and approached Srila Prabhupada, of course, Srila Prabhupada recognized his stature amidst so many others who were sincere but did not have his pedigree, which is that he's a pure Vaishnava from birth. Gour Govinda Maharaj would sit and give Bhagavatam lectures, the likes of which I had never heard before. And watching him was watching prasadam. He was the mercy of the Lord incarnate. On this divine day of his celebrating his life, I am praying that I can always remember him and follow in his footsteps by seeing his example and taking it up in my own life. And may all his followers all over the world be glorified on this day for serving him and spreading his message all over the world. Thank you very, very much for allowing me just to say a few words about this most exalted Vaishnav and one who has changed the world just by his walking on the planet Earth.
I had personally with Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj on that first meeting, and it was the same experience I had in all the other meetings I had over the years. It was mystical. He gave so much appreciation and encouragement to me that he really made me feel that my existence in ISKCON, my being a disciple of Srila Prabhupada and the service I was rendering was so very important. When we feel that what we're doing is making a difference and important, it is a great empowering experience. And he made me feel so important through his appreciative, encouraging words, but simultaneously, his example, his humility, his knowledge of the scriptures, his realizations of Krishna consciousness, and ultimately his pure unalloyed love for Sri Sri Radha Govinda Dev. It made me feel totally insignificant. Now, when both of these experiences are happening simultaneously in the heart, it's wonderful. He's simultaneously making me feel so important and totally unqualified and insignificant. Gour Govinda Maharaj's surrender was complete and absolute on all levels, from the core of his heart to his every word and his every action. I saw the austere conditions he was living in 1982, and it was far more austere previous to that. There was very little help that anyone was given. He never complained. With total gratitude and surrender, whatever the results were, however people treated him, he was surrendered to fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's desires. And he would tell me how it was so important to him in his love and surrender to Srila Prabhupada that the people of the world, in the present and for all time to come, should have total faith that Srila Prabhupada has given and is giving us everything. That there is no shortcoming, there is no lack of the highest realizations of Prema Bhakti in Srila Prabhupada's teachings, Srila Prabhupada's books. Gour Govinda Maharaj would often cite this verse of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Trinarapi sunichena taror iba sahishnana, amani namana dena kirtaniya sadahari. Gour Govinda Swami Maharaj, he lived that verse. For the rest of us, we're trying to practice that verse in order to please our Guru and Krishna. For Srila Gour Govinda Swami Maharaj, the manifestation of the truth of that verse was simply an outpouring of his love for Krishna. Gour Govinda Maharaj really revealed to our movement, and he's revealing to the whole world, the great treasure of significance of the eternal Leela of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri. When I read some of the beautiful books that Madhavananda Prabhu and your God brothers and God sisters have published of Gour Govinda Maharaj's talks. We could feel this experience that Gour Govinda Maharaj, when he's speaking, his heart, his soul is in the Gambhira, along with Ramananda Rai and Swarup Ramarama Goswami and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's revealing the feelings, the lessons, the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu within that most intimate part of his life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent almost 12 years of his life in the Gambhira, tasting the sweetness of Sri Radha's love. He gave us, on behalf of Srila Prabhupada, he gave us the essence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. And I could always feel Srila Prabhupada's inconceivable appreciation and empowerment toward Gour Govinda Swami Maharaj. Srila Gour Govinda Maharaj, in every sense, was truly an acharya. How he was so learned that every single word he spoke he could support with our Vaishnava scriptures and Vedic evidence. And Sharanagati, when he would give his lectures, it was simultaneously so sweet and it was like electrifying, like a thunderbolt sometimes. And it had the effect of awakening our devotional service. And when he would sing the beautiful songs, he would spontaneously, as he was giving classes, spontaneously, he would erupt with enthusiasm and chant Narottam Das Thakur's bhajans or Bhakti Vinod Thakur's bhajans or Lochan Das Thakur's bhajans or verses from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam. He was an embodiment of spontaneous love, yet always humble, always respectful. Even in his most courageous times, he embodied Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's spirit, and that was how he surrendered his life to Srila Prabhupada. It was just extraordinary, and each and every one of us is unlimitedly fortunate that either directly or indirectly we could be in the presence of such a pure, empowered acharya in the service of Srila Prabhupada.
Doliya, doliya, chole, bahu toli, hari bole. Doliya, chole, bahu toli, hari bole. Nayane, boheri tar pani. Such is Nitai, supremely merciful, the last limit of mercy, dayar, avadhi. Do you understand?